have a very special guest today, Yara Zgheib, and I apologize for not being able to pronounce your last name properly. It's
That was
beautiful
lovely.
though.
That was lovely.
And Yara, you are the author of No Land to Light On, this one that I'm holding up right here. This amazing novel, which is not your first, but it's your latest. So welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Jenny.
Pleasure's all mine. I wanted to start off with a little bit of your background. Where were you born? I know you have a very extensive education and you've accomplished so much.
Oh God, I wouldn't say that, but I have been lucky. I was born in Lebanon, in Beirut, but I've been lucky to have lived in many different places. I lived in Glasgow when I was a kid. When we were growing up, my father was studying there, and we all went. I lived in Lebanon. I studied there. For a while, I lived in Washington D.C. And then I moved to Paris and I lived there for a while. And now I'm based in Boston with my family. I have a background in international relations with a specialization in counterterrorism and sub-state violence and a PhD, all of which I do not use now, but it's there. And it was just, I think, a very long and convoluted way to get back to what I wanted to do from the very beginning, which is writing.
Do you feel like your knowledge in those fields helped you write No Land to Light On?
You know, it's a very It's a very thought-provoking question because there is a lot of politics in the book, isn't there?
Yeah.
There are very big international human issues, and having studied it for so long, I'm sure that definitely helped with a lot of the research that was involved. But I think what my education in international relations and in politics and in things like war and peace really gave me was an insight as to how deeply human and damaging these things are. It just my studies helped me connect things like the news and words and images you see on a screen to real people and real lives. And they made me appreciate the very real consequences of politics and laws on
Right.
people's lives. And I think it was that awareness of how real this is. This is not just something you study in a classroom or practice in an office or say in a speech. It's very real. I think that helped me very much in and motivated me to write No Land to Light On.
And it's reflected in the book so well. I mean, when I started to read it, it took me a while to shake off that feeling that this wasn't a nonfiction story, if that makes sense. It felt like an account of something that had really happened, which it did, and we'll get into that. But these characters are not real. Um, but uh, it definitely felt, you did such an amazing job marrying factual things that happened with this couple's story.
Thank you for saying that. That was very much the intention. I mean, as you say, Sama and Hadi, and the story is fictional, but these are events that happened, and there were real people who were very much affected and families that were separated. And I was trying to tell their story through this fictional couple that find themselves separated. So I'm glad it worked.
Yeah. Do you think that made it easier to write, the fact that these were fictional people as opposed to having used, you know, a real life person?
Oh, well, so the backstory is this initially was not a work of fiction. There were this book was written three times. There are three manuscripts, three full manuscripts, and the first was not at all a work of fiction. And Sama and Hedi were very real people, and they were not called Sama and Hedi. It started out as my own journal, my notes, my thoughts, um, based on my own experience being separated from my husband with my children, not due to the travel ban per se, and we're not Syrian, but because of an executive order that was passed, and whose ramifications were that my family was torn apart. And the first time I wrote this book, it was just me pouring my heart out, just me having all these feelings and not understanding and not being able to fathom how something someone wrote on a piece of paper could destroy a life, could destroy a family. And that was why I wrote the book the first time. And it was not a good book. It was a very sad and hurt and not a good book. Um, the second time I wrote this book, I turned it into a work of fiction, and Sama and Hadi appeared, and but it was still a very I still had a lot of healing and growing to do, and a lot of understanding to do. So it was not a book about love. It was very much a book about politics and about separation and about identity and about home and immigration. But the third time I wrote this book, I realized I wanted to write about what I stood for, not what the world was throwing at me. Because the world will throw terrible things at you. I mean, just today and yesterday, we're all watching what's going on in Ukraine. And these are people who 2 days ago were like you and me, had families, were struggling to find babysitters, were, were thinking of, what to make for dinner, or what their plans were for the weekend. And now everything's ruined because of a piece of paper, because of a law, because of a decision someone made in some office somewhere. And this is the reality of the world, and it's a terrible injustice, but that is not what I wanted to write. I wanted to write what I stood for, and what I stand for is love. And I don't mean this in a cheesy, red hearts Valentine's way. I mean it in a genuine way. These are the values I stand for, which are family, which are home, being the loyalty to the people you love. It about when you choose to love, when everyone around you is hating, you become free no matter what gets thrown at you. And that was hopefully what came out in the third book. So,
Is.
in a very long answer to your short question, yes, they are fictional, but they're not really fictional, Sama and Hadi. No.
Uh, I I can't imagine what you must have been through and what that must have felt like. But it's a testament to your strength and your family's strength, and I'm glad you're all okay. And I think this book touches on so many things that so many people can relate to. So if this is what came out of it, I we can all learn from you because as you said, that first book must have been so angry, and of course, I think that as immigrants, that's one of the emotions that we all deal with. How do you overcome that anger of being uprooted from your home, from your culture, from the things that you value, and all of a sudden have to start over, even though you're grateful, you know?
You know, the interesting thing, I used to think it was anger. And oh, from my own experience, and it might be very different for other people, I think it's more, for me, it was really fear masquerading as at anger, fear of this unknown, fear of not being in control, feeling I'm in a new place, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have all these tiny elements that's sort of my safeguard. Like the language is, I yes, I speak the language, but there are always these cultural references that I don't get. I don't understand how people think, how things work. When you're so unmoored, and you're just you want to make this home, and you want to make it work, but you're scared. And it's a bit like children in a playground at school. The bullies are usually the ones who are the most scared, because this is the only way they know how to deal with this emotion. So I think the first book for me was a very frightened book, a book that was very overwhelmed by the lack of control. I was adrift. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what would happen. What do I have that's guaranteed? Nothing. it was very sad, and it probably came out as very angry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Especially the fear that you just mentioned, because there is a lot of fear involved. There's a lot of the unknown. You know, what's going to happen? Are you going to
Mm,
be okay? Is your family going to be okay? It's
yeah,
difficult. Yeah, it was. One of the things I loved was how, even though I'm not Syrian, nowhere close to
me
being,
neither.
to that part of the world. But my own immigration story is in a way reflected here. My family was apart for 4 years. I was very young and I didn't understand why I had to live without, my dad, why there were no phone calls and all those little things that we take for granted. Those couldn't happen, and it was really difficult to understand why. And like you mentioned, because of someone else's decision who doesn't know me, why is his decision affecting my life?
Very true.
Yeah,
And by the way, thank you very much for sharing your story. When you and I were chatting before
yeah,
the podcast, I think hearing about your experience and your family experience just reinforced how it's not about you being Syrian or Mexican or Cuban or Swedish or it's not about your nationality. It is something that could happen to any human, but at the same time, we all have the same concerns. We all want our father or our parents home at the end of the day. We all want to feel safe. It's incredible how no matter how different we all are, and we all come from very different stories. Your story is not my story, and my story is not Saman Hedi's story, but we all want the same things at the end of the day. We just want home. We just want to be okay. I don't think it's too much to ask. And I think you and I, with our families, we're the lucky ones. There are so
yeah,
many people,
yeah,
so many. And I mean, you say there's a lot to learn from you. I didn't do anything. I was just very lucky. And I am very conscious of all the families who were not as lucky. And
right. Where are the stories that ended up being okay? But
exactly.
there's so many that unfortunately didn't.
Mm.
There's a lot to say for the immigrant experience, which is one of the things that I loved about this book. um the way you brought that in. Well, first of all, with the representation of the birds, I love that metaphor all throughout. Because obviously birds migrate, through the year or for winter, but they always get to go back, right? And we don't get to, at least most of us don't get to go back. So to experience that with Sama and her love for birds, that was really special for the reader, for me as the reader. I love that.
Um,
um do you identify with Sama?
I think there are a lot of elements in Sama uh, that I definitely identify with. But not everything. Not all the aspects of her personality. I could never be as scientific as she is, but there are definitely. I do share her love of birds, for instance, and one of the beautiful things when I was doing research for this book, just because you mentioned bird migration, was yes, birds migrate like us because they have to, for food, for shelter, for warmer climates, to escape predators, etc., to breed. But there are also birds that apparently migrate for no reason. And that part I just found so beautiful. And the parallel with humans who are just free spirits and just choose to go. Why? Because the world is vast. Because and that I think the bird metaphor was just brilliant because they not brilliant. I mean
No, it
brilliant.
is. It is. It is
Uh,
brilliant.
it was just it felt very powerful because there's such a spectrum. There are so many reasons birds migrate and so many different kinds of birds that migrate. And at the same time, there are so many reasons people leave and people go places and some return and some don't return and some go to escape things, some go to seek things. a different life maybe, and some just go because look how gorgeous the world is, and why not? Let's go. And um, I have to say, the birds were definitely my favorite part of the book.
I agree with you. That was a treat. Every time there was a reference to the birds, it felt like a balance between all the heavy things that were happening, and then it was like a little relief for a couple of paragraphs that we get to, like, step away from reality.
Quite nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed that a lot. Um, who would you say was the most difficult character to create, to write?
Ooh, I struggled with several. Hattie was difficult because I had to get into the mind of a man, and the mind of a man who has recently become a father and is already sort of coming into a country not as somewhat feeling inferior because he doesn't have the language, and because he's a refugee. And so this is someone who's already struggling with his position, and also now is losing power over his own autonomy and his own freedom, and he can't even protect his family, and he's angry but also helpless and trapped. And it it took me a while to try to understand what it means to be a man, a husband, a father of a family in that situation. So that character was not easy. But to be very honest, the hardest character to write, the one that I think took the most rewrites, was the officer who interviews Hadi in the interrogation room. Because there are so many ways to write that character. For those of you who haven't read the book, there's one scene where Hadi's in an interrogation room in Logan Airport, and he's being informed that his visa is no longer valid and that he cannot enter the country and has to leave the United States. Meanwhile, his wife is in arrivals waiting for him, and he's becoming aware that his life is falling apart. He cannot come home. The most difficult character to write in response to your question, Jenny, was the officer interrogating him, because there are so many ways to write that character. In one scene, he was, this horrible villain. And then in the other, he is this very sympathetic person. And I really had to stop and try to understand what it means to be this man who is just doing his job. He has just received orders saying all people with these passports and these types of visas or this sort of paperwork cannot enter the country. You need to interview them, you need to get all the necessary information, and you need to inform them that they're being put on a plane and they have to leave the country. This person is just a person. This person is someone who believes in the system, chose this job, wakes up every morning, and then comes back to his family. And to be able to write that character, even though he only appears in one chapter, I think he was the hardest for me to write.
I never thought that would be your answer, but now it makes all the sense in the world. When you
It was
wrote him,
exhausting.
yeah, the way as a reader I experienced him, it was so effortlessly. So it's a testament to your talent. I did not think that was going to be your answer, but I can see, yeah, you're absolutely right. How because there are moments when he's likable and when we can connect with him. And if you're honest, or if I'm honest, I should say, maybe I would have acted the same way he did, you know? If you're thinking that all these people you're being told that they're a danger to your country and you need to get them out.
Exactly. And that you touched on an excellent point. What would I do if I were being told that my country and my values were being threatened by people like this man?
Right. And it's
I
up to me to make sure that
exactly.
I keep things safe.
You know,
I
there's a part. I'm sorry to
No,
interrupt
no,
you.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
There's one part in the scene where he gets angry and he says something about, I've seen people like you, and I served in
Yeah,
the war. and and this patriotism that comes out in the officer, you have to understand it too. I mean, he loves his country, and he has a family to protect, he has values to uphold, and he is genuinely angry at Hadi. I think this book was a true challenge for me in trying to see the humanity in every single person in every situation. It was it was a brilliant exercise for me in being more human.
Well, you rose to the occasion for sure. Because now thinking about that, I had to be honest, I hadn't considered that. Thinking about that, I can see how that must have been so difficult, and how it would have been so easy just to write him as this just evil, officer that has zero understanding of other people's pain, but you didn't. So I appreciate that, as I'm sure everyone else does.
Oh, thank you. It took a few tries. It took many tries.
Well, as they say, third time's a charm, right?
3rd or 5th or 10th unit. Let's go with 3rd.
Yeah, in this case, it would be third. Um, Sama, obviously, I definitely identified with her, but the thing that I think she helped me with the most was understand my own mother and what my mother went through. Because you always see things from your own perspective. And I just remember my mom being hurt for so long. And sometimes me saying, like, that's it, this is our life, shake it off. And now I see how selfish of me that was. So she definitely helped me connect with my own mother's experience.
Well, that's first of all beautiful. And tell me, how long was your mother separated from your father? How long were you all separated from your father?
It's really not long at all. It was 3.5 years.
It's quite
Um,
long. That is quite
you
long.
think we always feel like we were so lucky because we know so many people that waited 10, 15. Um, it was almost miraculous how quickly it happened for us. We usually say there was definitely divine intervention in our reunion, but it was back in 1990, from 1991 to 1995. So, cell phones weren't a thing. Calls were not legal, so we had to use a neighbor's phone and then like jump from neighbor to neighbor to so that the whole tracking or whatever that was, because it wasn't tracking then, it was just people watching. um so long story short, phone calls were like once every 2 weeks for just 20 minutes, and it was always at past midnight because everyone's asleep, so it was safe to have these phone calls. um, so yeah, it was very tough on her, and I never gave her enough credit, you know?
I think we all don't give our mothers enough credit. You say 3.5 years is short, but it must be an eternity when you don't know. I mean, now you know it's 3.5 years, but when you're in this uncertainty and you're in a foreign country and you have a child. Do you have siblings?
I
Forgive me for asking.
do, I have a sister. So at
Oh,
the
so you
time, I was 7 and my sister was 1. 1,
can you
yes, she was 1.
imagine? Can you imagine this woman in a country with 2 young children? Oh, wow. Wow, it's Herculean, and at the same time, you're right, we cannot understand it. You know how our mothers always used to say, "When you become a mother, you'll understand."
Yeah.
Yeah, you did it,
And
wow.
I used to roll my eyes, like, "Really? I have to wait to be able to understand?" But it's so true. Now, that I'm a mom, I can definitely see things in a different layer, especially when it comes to her. And, the story of Sama kept adding to that layer as, as I'm sure many other stories will, as I continue to grow in my own motherhood. Um, but it's nice to be able to go back and realize things.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And Hattie, he is just perfect. for lack of a better word. He's so caring, and he's just such a he rises to the occasion no matter how scary it is, and his purpose, he's very clear, he wants a better life, and
Yeah.
it's just so unfair what happens to him. You feel that unfairness that life sometimes throws at people, or we do to ourselves. I don't know, the jury's still out on that one. Um, but he's very special.
He's um he's a very good human, and I think he has his flaws. He has many flaws, and he gets angry, and he gets drunk, and he deals with the situation in such clumsy, I wouldn't say wrong, I would just say clumsy ways, and it all goes back to this anger being actually just fear. But he is, at the end of the day, he's just a man in love with his wife. He's a man who now has a son he hasn't met, and just he wants his family together, and he wants them to be safe. And
Yeah. And
yeah,
the most difficult part is knowing that he had every right to be here. He's a legal immigrant. He's not asking for any favors. He deserved to be here. And yet he's turned away.
the crazy thing is, I don't know where we're born with this expectation of things will be fair. Maybe it's all the Disney that I adore, by the way. But it might just be all these stories that we have, that we expect that if you're a good person, if you do the right things, if you
I think that's the key. We're brought up with these values, and we feel like if we stick to them, life is gonna give us something back. You're gonna get a reward, but
the, the real
you don't always.
no, you don't. No, you don't. And it doesn't have to be something as drastic as an executive order or throwing you out of the country. It could be the simplest thing, like I walk out of this interview and I fall and I snap my neck and I'm in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. I mean, that's not fair, but it happens. There are so many unfair things that happen. I think one of the things this book taught me was, yes, life is unfair, and I am free to still choose happiness and to still choose what I make of my life in spite of all that. Not expect life to be fair. When you stop expecting it to, and when it stops mattering, I mean, it will still hurt. I think there's a beautiful Buddhist quote by some Buddhist teacher, and I apologize that I will totally say it wrong. But in Buddhism, they say pain is inevitable, suffering is a choice.
Oh,
And
yes.
I think that makes total sense. There will be pain, there will be injustice. Nobody's life is roses and flowers, whether it's executive orders or what's going on in all around the world, all these different wars, whether it's COVID, whether it's anything, something is going to happen. Um, but how you deal with it is a choice.
I think that's one of the things that made this book extra special is the fact that you are dealing with such heavy topics and themes, and the story itself, it's sad, but then you walk away by the end with this believe in the human spirit. They made it. They're still standing. They're there. They're strong, and it just reminds you of how really humanity is. We're resilient,
Yeah.
as cliche as that is.
Oh, it makes me very happy to hear you say that. That was definitely what I hoped to reach with this book. By the end of the book, this lightness, this just go.
I wanted to ask you about a specific quote at the end. Whose freedom is to dig their roots deep in the ground, searching, hoping, fighting for water and the possibility of birds returning. That one struck me because obviously for immigrants, the theme of freedom is always that first purpose of why we do these um, almost impossible things, right? To go to a new place and start over, especially if there's a language barrier or cultural difference that's vast. Um, but you still do. You show up with nothing but your grit and your belief that something good is going to happen out of this decision. So the fact that you described freedom is to dig their roots deep in the ground. That was really that really stood out to me because you think your roots are where you left, but you can start new roots, if you
Exactly.
dig deep. So what does that mean to you?
That that particular sentence, um, I'm very attached to it. When I wrote it, I was thinking of my father. My father is in Lebanon, and he loves that country. He loves that land. His own father, did everything, planted the pear trees, planted the vines, and the, my father has a very solid attachment to the land and to the history and to the culture of a country that is falling apart and that has done him so much pain. Um, whether it's the economic crisis or whether it's the civil war in that country. I don't know if you know anything about the history of Lebanon, but
Only a
it is
little.
not a rosy history. And but my father, trapped as he is, and as he has been in several instances in his life, and when I say my father, I also mean my mother, but my father specifically because of his love for the land, he he was always a free man. He is, if objectively, he is not a free man. He is a man trapped by his passport, trapped in his country, trapped by his circumstance. But he is such a free man because he has never given up hope. And that's what the tree metaphor is freedom is this tree's decision to keep digging those roots down, 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 because it will keep hoping that it will find water there, even if there is no water. The tree is free to keep digging and keep sending those roots down, and nobody can stop that tree from doing it, even though it looks like the tree is just trapped. The tree is in one place, it can't go anywhere. A tree can't pack up and leave, it's not a bird. But even in its being trapped in that one place and it's digging its roots deeper, there's a freedom in that. And it is something I see in my father and that I respect very much.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing. I was not expecting that. No wonder this quote is so that part of the paragraph is just so um strong because it came from a strong place.
Well, thank you. It definitely came from a personal place.
Yeah, I can see that now. So where do you think Sama and Hadi are today?
Ooh, I've been asked that question, and that question was problematic in publishing the book because uh, many beta readers and um, people at the publishing house, so many people were unhappy with this undetermined ending to the book. Of
Mhm.
we don't really know what happens to them. I'm going to disappoint you again, but I don't know where they are, and the more important thing is it doesn't matter because by the end of the book, Sama has understood. There's a part where she tells him, "Let's go, let's go to Amman, to Beirut, to Paris. Let's
Mhm.
pitch a tent somewhere in the middle of nowhere and just sit in the tent and be happy." And that's the point. It doesn't matter where they are because they're together. Like they could be anywhere. But if your home is the people you love, and that's what really matters. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I have no idea where they
You're
are.
not you could never disappoint me or anybody that's read your work for that matter. I can almost guarantee it. Um, and to be honest, I was expecting an answer like that.
Oh,
I just
good.
felt like I had to ask, but I can tell you intentionally left, the book where it's at without really being clear on where they are, because their love for each other and what they're willing to do for their family is it speaks for itself. That's what matters, like you said,
Yeah.
not the physical place. And isn't that the story of an immigrant? The place itself doesn't matter. It's
You take your home
you
with
have
you.
your family safe and together and in a place where they're thriving. But it could be anywhere.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Um, there's a beautiful poem that I'm probably going to misquote again, by T.S. Eliot, where he is it T.S. Eliot? No, no, I apologize. T.E. Cummings. Oh dear.
Oh,
Okay,
he's one of my favorites.
he's wonderful, and oh, I caught that right. That would have been embarrassing.
Don't worry.
T.E. Cummings, where he says, "I carry your heart. I carry it with me. I carry it in my heart. Wherever I go, you go, my darling, and I'm never without it." Again, the poem is gorgeous. I completely butchered it, but the essence is that I take your heart with me wherever I go, and
Yeah,
that's home.
right, right. So I have to show you something. So funny that you said that because I always have these quote of his here in my journal. Where is it? Wait, it's always here with me. It's a couple years old, but it says, "May I be is the only prayer, not may I be great or good or beautiful or wise or strong." And I
Yeah.
try to yeah, I try to remember that. Sometimes we get so clouded, right, with like all these things that we need to be. And he just says, "May I be," right? Like, "May I be who I am, may I be here, may I be a person." If you start off with that, you're good. Yeah. So it feels serendipitous that you brought him up because I was just going through this before we started chatting.
Oh, it does, and I didn't know that quote of his, so thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know you have to go soon. We only have a few minutes left,
Gosh, yes.
but can you quickly tell me about your process? Because you're a mom and a wife, and you have two little ones. How do you manage to turn out such a masterpiece? I can't even write a grocery list. Well, that's why you're the writer, not me, but
I have to tell you, my grocery list is all over the place. If um, today is not the best day to ask me. I have no idea. On a My process is in a dream world, I would have a quiet cabin. You know what? I don't even need a cabin, just a small room with a desk that's quiet, with some light and, not cold, and just to be able to write. I could do that. Oh my God, you could lock me in there for a month and I would be the happiest girl in the world because I would be with writing and reading. That would be wonderful. Now that's the dream world. In real life, you said it. I mean, I'm a wife, I'm a mom. I Life gets very chaotic. And I love I love the way Toni Morrison dealt with, like, I always think of her, even though, okay, Toni Morrison, Nobel Prize, no comparison there, but aspirational. Um, she was raising two children on her own and working a full-time job, and she still wrote the books that she wrote. So
amazing.
if she could do it, I can do it. If I have half an hour and this is all I get, sit down and write for half an hour. You chose this career. You chose to write because you love to write. Make it work. Yeah, so I don't have an elegant process. I have a dream process and then I have a real life process. I have a kitchen counter which is higher than my twins can reach. So that means I can put the laptop on it and write. And
For
that's so
now.
convenient. I don't know if that counts as a process. Um, but I do have a very, very supportive family, and um, I have a husband who respects my profession, which is rare because it's I'm a writer. I'm not working for a company, but he does his best to give me the time to write, and yeah, the process is you make it work however you can.
I love that, because it sounds like anyone can do it, and I mean anyone who obviously feels so inclined, They don't need a magical formula. They just need to get to it, right?
Hey, Toni Morrison did it, and look at the masterpieces she created. I
She
mean,
is, yeah, she's one of the greats. But I'm so happy that I was able to talk to you. I'm so happy that I I got to read this book. It's definitely I finished it almost a month ago and it's been on my mind. I find myself, in those moments when you're not really thinking, something about this book will come into my mind. So it's definitely special, and you're so talented. Your writing style is just amazing. It's the imagery, and I think I mentioned this to you when we were talking privately. It feels like a movie, which I know
very,
everyone says that about all books, but this one really does feel like it should be. I should look up a documentary on it or something.
oh wow.
You're
Thank you.
very talented.
That is a wonderful compliment and very heartening. I needed to hear that today, I think. Thank you. And it
Oh,
was such a pleasure and an honor to be here, really. I'm delighted that you reached out and this was wonderful.
thank you. I appreciate that. I hope to have you back.
I would
Um,
love to.
yes, I feel like there's so much I want to talk to you about. You're such a wealth of information. Um,
Oh,
yeah, and you are. You really are. And such a joy to talk to as well, which is a
likewise. Likewise. This I can't believe it's been an hour.
right? Yeah, it goes by fairly quickly.
It's just
I always
lovely
feel
to
like, after an hour and a half, I'm like, "That what? I have so much
know.
more I need to ask." But thank you, Yara, so much. I look forward to, uh, you know, uh, engaging with your work in the future and, anything that we can do here on our end, to help, please count on us.
Thank you,
We have a
Jenny.
literary family now in Miami.
Well, thank you. And I love your podcast. So keep doing the beautiful things you do too.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that so much. But anyway, I will let you go. Go enjoy your babies and your Friday night.
Thank you.
And
You as well. Have a good evening.
you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.